Welcome to Crime Beat. I'm Anthony Robart. Tonight, it's the worst shootout in Toronto's history, involving an unknown number of suspects and an arsenal of weapons that turned one area of the city into a war zone.
The door flung open. There was a man laying military style on the ground, pointing his gun at us.
The bullets are hitting the police cars, the bullets are hitting the walls. There's a lot of bullets coming out of them.
Where's the ambulance? He kept saying, where's the ambulance? And I kept saying, it's coming, it's coming. It felt like we were done. This was the day that we were going to die.
Send an ambulance. Ambulance has been ordered.
You hear the shots being fired right now as I speak. It's a highly volatile, dangerous situation.
I remember watching them come out of the room thinking, these guys look like ordinary guys. They're just a couple of kids.
What I found from the RCMP in the 911 was that a gun shop had been robbed and the two owners, husband and wife, had been basically executed.
So cold-blooded, just so unnecessary. Just a vicious, vicious crime.
Here now is Karen Lieberman with the Rainbow Motel Shootout.
Today, the westernmost end of Toronto's lakeshore is a concentration of condo buildings, lakefront parks, cafes, and restaurants. But in 1991, this stretch of what was then the city of Etobicoke was lined with seedy motels and a reputation.
It's where you went if you wanted to hide and didn't want anybody to ask any questions. It was also probably the cheapest place to get a room in Toronto. Robbery suspects, prostitutes, and all the associated drug dealers, they went there and they stayed there for the same reasons we went there. It was because they could hide and we knew they were hiding.
Well, I would head down to the motel strip area, try first thing in the morning before I had coffee, and I would run every car in the motel strip area to see if I got any hits back. And quite often you'd get a wanted person, a stolen car, a lot of different activity happening, kept the police in that area busy.
For the police officers assigned to 21 Division, Saturday, January 19th, 1991 started like any other.
I was with my partner, Mike Ervick, and we were in the community response unit. Basically walk the beat is what we did.
We were just driving around, going in and out of the motels.
At about 8 a.m., constables Mike Ervick and Peter Phoenix pulled into the Rainbow Motel to follow up on an assault that happened the night before. As they did, something caught their eye.
As we're going down through the driveway, we spot this Porsche. People that drive Porsches don't stay at the Rainbow Motel.
The officers run the plate and discover the car, registered to room 18, had been stolen a month earlier.
So we had a look at the registration card, and I don't remember what the names were, but they were so far-fetched that you knew that they weren't anybody's names. I asked the clerk if he was the one that checked them in, and he said no. I said, have you seen the people in that room at all? And he says no. He says he just came on for the day shift.
We put it over the air just to let everybody know where we are, what we have.
There's a stolen Porsche. Wow, that stuck out like a sore thumb. And I thought, being a rookie, I want to go and see, I want to go check this out. You know, I was young and full of spit and vinegar, you know. And Earl said, yeah, okay, we'll go.
Earl Skipon and his partner, Kathy Geach, who was a trainee at the time, responded to the call we weren't asking for assistance. We recovered stolen cars in the motel area all the time. It was routine. What happened was not routine.
That morning, I told them about a dream that I had, that Earl had been involved in a shooting and they had a shotgun. And I told everybody on the platoon, and everyone laughed it off.
As a matter of fact, her veteran partner had requested to bring a shotgun out on shift that day.
Constables Earl Skipon and Kathy Geach arrived in their car and parked out front of the room.
Earl went to the trunk of his car, he got a shotgun out and started loading it. I says, Earl, it's a stolen car. I knocked on the door and identified myself as a police officer. There was no response. I knocked again and said, it's the police, can we speak to you? And there was no answer.
A member of the motel cleaning staff was passing by and provided police with a pass key.
As I was opening up the door, the chain lock was on. And I was sort of looking over my shoulder and I could see that Earl was standing right there with a shotgun pointed at the door. I could see in the room, it was dark in there, both beds had been slept in. And again, I identified myself as a police officer. Anybody there? No answer. As I was holding the screen door, I kicked the door to knock off the chain lock.
The door flung open from the inside. There was a man laying military style on the ground, pointing his gun at us. And at that split second, my first thought was just get out of the way. And then the shots just started.
It's significant. It's not a handgun that's a revolver, which is boom, boom, boom. It sounds like automatic gunfire. The bullets are hitting the police cars, the bullets are hitting the walls. On the other side of the parking area, you can see the cement chips falling off the buildings. There's a lot of bullets coming out of that room.
I rolled to the side, and Earl was returning gunfire as he backed up to take cover in behind the scout car. Mike ran around the back, and he was about 20 feet away from me. We were parallel to each other. I was behind a great big huge oak tree.
I ran around to the back to look at the back window of room 18, and I saw a suspect coming out of the room looking north, away from me, and carrying an assault rifle and pointing it towards the lakeshore. You could hear the gunfire coming out of the front of the room, still continuous. So I fired on that individual coming out of the room. I saw him fall to the windowsill and fall back into the room.
3 shots. And he says me something to the effect of, I just blew the guy's head off. And I went, oh my God.
I ran to the back of my police car and I could hear the shots being fired as we were running. And when Earl got back to the back of the police car where I was, he had been shot twice.
They were both in a precarious position in front of the room where they could be seen and shot at. Our police car, which was Scout Car 2105, was parked just south of the Porsche and was riddled with gunfire. It was like Swiss cheese.
Earl was actually loading the shotgun and shooting it with one hand, one arm. And we didn't know how many guys were in that room, whether actually there was 2 more guys in that room, or 3 or 4. The people inside were shooting out through the windows, through the door.
It was just nonstop, bang, bang, bang. You could hear glass breaking, you could hear tires with the air deflating, you could hear the ricochets, the stones coming up underneath the police car. And I just kept thinking every shot was going to be the shot that hit me or finished off Earl. I was terrified, but I knew we needed help.
Dodging a hailstorm of bullets, Kathy managed to crawl inside the police cruiser.
It took everything that I had to get in there because I was so afraid. I thought I was going to die. And I just grabbed the phone and said, we have an officer down, please come and help us. We're trapped, we can't go anywhere. And I just remember thinking, I'm a single bum. My 4- and 5-year-old, I've got to survive this. The dispatcher kept saying, repeat, can you repeat? And I'm like, we're in a shootout. This is gunfire, it's not static, it's gunfire. We're being shot at. Get us some help, get us an ambulance. I wanted to keep Earl from going into any more shock than he was in. You could tell that he was not doing well. Although even after being shot, he kept shooting so that they would stay within the motel because we were totally outgunned.
The Iraqi war, Desert Storm, was taking place at the time. So we were seeing these kinds of firefights going on TV every day. And that's the only thing I could think of. These are terrorists from Iraq. They have to be. This doesn't happen in Canada. They had more guns and the different sounds of the guns. They had AK-47s, they had M16s, AR-15s.
In those days we carried Smith & Wesson 38s. You would have 6 bullets in your gun, and most of the guys carried what was called a speed loader, which had 6 more bullets in it. When Mike shot off his 3 shots, he said, "I've only got 3 bullets left." He says, "Give me 3 of yours." And I said, "I'm not giving you my 3 bullets." I says, "Because then I only have 3 bullets left."
I get a call from our station duty operator, and he tells me, "We've got this big call going on. There's shots fired, a policeman's been shot." And I'm thinking like, yeah, right, you know, like these calls don't happen in Toronto. And he says, "No, listen," and he puts the phone to the overhead speaker, and I can hear this rapid gunfire. It's clearly fully automatic weapons. One of my gun team members gets on the air and says, "We need the armoured vehicle." So I said to my operator, "Can you get it started running?" So the engine's warmed up, it's January, cold, not a vehicle we use all the time. I pull into the parking lot. Here's his little blue Ford Escort with jumper cables boosting our armoured vehicle. Got it running, and off I go. One of the things it's important to recognise with this vehicle, it's heavy. So the braking system on it was not ideal. So I can drive with lights and sirens going, which I was, but I can only do about 80 kilometres an hour. So here I am, lights and sirens, and cars are passing me instead of me passing vehicles. What I was thinking was, I got to get there.
Welcome back. When police knocked on the door of room 18 at Toronto's Rainbow Motel, they were met with a barrage of gunfire, the likes of which they had never seen. One officer is down, and he, along with 3 others, are trapped waiting for help to arrive, armed only with 6-shot revolvers and a single shotgun. We now return to Karen Lieberman and the Rainbow Motel Shootout.
"Where's the ambulance?" He kept saying, "Where's the ambulance?" And I kept saying, "It's coming, it's coming. You're gonna be okay." I kept reassuring him, "It's coming." But it felt like forever. It felt like we were done. This was the day that we were gonna die.
Send an ambulance. Ambulance has been ordered. All units are advised not to go down to the room as where the gunshots have been fired.
I do remember speaking with the dispatch, and she had said, we're getting help right now, but we felt like we were alone because protocol is like no other officers in the line of fire. And we were in an area where they would have been shot. So we were relying on the ETF to get there as soon as they could. And I remember just being pinned down for approximately 25 minutes of high-pressured stress and fear. Most critical incidents are done within 2 minutes. We were 25 minutes under heavy gunfire. And at that time, we just kept sporadically just showing them we still had that shotgun. Bullets were flying everywhere. It was a scene right out of a movie.
At the same time when all this is happening, obviously the communications has ordered our emergency task force to attend and help us. And every constable available, and even those that weren't available in Etobicoke, were racing to the scene. You could hear the sirens coming within seconds. It was reassuring.
Perhaps most reassuring, the arrival of the ETF, including Chris May.
So initially, they wanted Skip-on and Geach to get into the police car that was there and drive out. And Skip-on says, "No, it's too dangerous to do that. We're putting ourselves in risk." He said, "I can run." So they said, "Okay, we'll put cover fire into the room. And as we put the cover fire in, you and Geach get out of there." So I drove the armoured vehicle down there, and I had Phil Devine, one of my guys, in the back with me.
The ETF fellow by the name of Phil Devine, he's the first face I saw after 20 minutes of terror. And I just remember him yelling to me, "We can't get in to get you. We have to cover fire." I just said, "Just help." He said, "You have to grab Earl, get him to your side, and when I tell you to go, get up and run as fast as you can to the lake shore. Once he yelled, "Cover fire, move, move." And I just remember getting up and moving and running as fast as I could. And that was when I heard probably the most amount of bullets that I ever heard. He just went in and like very loud, very aggressive, and we got to safety.
We grab the other 2 coppers, we get them out of there. And I was a little bit worried because the pathway at the back of the motel, it wasn't paved, it was mud. And I'm thinking, oh man, like is this thing gonna sink in it? And I made the turn, come around.
The way it works is there's a trap door underneath. So you have to get on the ground and sort of crawl along the ground. And Mike was in there, and then I got in there.
Chris was driving and he can't get any further north, so he backs up and the bullets are hitting the armored car. You can hear the ting, 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 ting.
The pathway's blocked by another scout car. My first thought was, I can't drive north. My second thought was, if I try to ram that car out of the way, I'm worried it's going to stall and we're going to be stuck, sitting ducks literally in front of this place. So I'm going to have to back up. So I backed up to get it out.
You take a deep breath. Now we're safe.
The chief came down, talked to us, we told him what we knew, and Mike said that he'd blown this guy's head off. But he actually hadn't. What had happened was the one guy had ear defenders on, shooting ear defenders on, and Mike had shot him basically across the side of his head, and it hit the defenders, and that's what blew up.
After the rescue, police began removing people trapped in the Rainbow and neighboring motels. Police then shot tear gas into the room. The gunman responded only with more gunfire and refused to give up.
I got the call from the station operator. He says we've got one heck of a call going. He was able to hold the phone up to the police radio, and I could hear the gunfire taking place. It was unbelievable, like it really was.
Outside the motel, Chris May brings negotiator Barney McNeely up to speed before getting into the armored vehicle together with a bullhorn.
And I started calling in with the occupants. Would you please identify yourselves? Let's talk, etc., etc. Absolutely nothing.
It was clear that we weren't getting anywhere with the negotiation in these early stages. We drive round to the front of the place and start to lob tear gas ferrets into this room. We had difficulty doing it because they had barricaded the windows, so the ferrets were penetrating the glass in the door, but they were getting blocked. But we actually put every tear gas ferret we had in the unit that day into that room. I can't fathom how they didn't come out.
You hear the shots being fired right now as I speak. It's a highly volatile, dangerous situation.
Chris and I decided that the best way to try to talk to them was by utilizing police radio on a special band. So a decision was made, because I was going to be the negotiator, that I would deliver the phone under pretty strict conditions. Those conditions being that I walked up the side of the back of the motel, hugging the wall as close as possible. When I got to the window, then I was able to call in.
I give him credit. He puts the radio on the windowsill of the back window, and then he starts to talk to them.
I just said, fellas, this is how you operate. Just push the little button on the side. Don't be touching anything else, and withdrew immediately.
We get him back in the armoured vehicle and we started the negotiation process.
Now look, please, this has been going on for several hours now. Let's get it over and done with. You know there's going to be no injuries, there's going to be no shots fired by any side, believe me. What we want to do is resolve this, but you must listen and pay attention as to how you have to come out.
They started off by giving me a number of different names, and the conversations went back and forth quite a bit.
Did you trust the information they were providing?
You have no option, honestly. You really don't.
Marty, give us a couple minutes, please. We gotta talk this guy over. No problem, Steve. A couple of minutes. Are you making out in there? We're getting there. That's good, Steve. I'm glad to hear that. Yeah, well, we got two of us agree, but Buddy on the floor doesn't want to do it.
It wasn't until much later on that they said to me that one of them had been injured.
How's the wound there? Well, it's starting to slow down. I mean, it's not exactly great tons of blood, but he should be good enough that he can sit here very calmly. As long as he's not like jumping around, I guess he'll be all right. Okay, whereabouts was he hit exactly? Like, was it a real serious one or superficial? Well, it was sort of like a half a graze right against his skull, because it pierced the ear. There's a nice big hole in the earlobe, and then there's a red streak that goes along the side of his head. It's John. Yeah, John, how are you? Well, I got a nice headache, I'll tell you that, but it doesn't feel too good. And by the way, what the hell's the big point? John, there's no big point. There were shots fired. There was injuries both on your side and a police officer. Fortunately enough, the police officer is not seriously injured. However, this must be resolved, and you know in your heart we've been here now 5 to 6 hours, and it has to be resolved one way or the other. We don't want it to turn nasty, but if it has to, that's what we're here for. But let's resolve it peacefully.
It was pretty obvious that there were a couple of pretty violent young gentlemen there, and you know, for them to open fire on Earl and Kathy and then pinned the other 2 officers down and fired in their direction. You know, that all goes through your head.
Him and James have a serious amount of armor here and stuff like that, and like we were just here for the party. I mean, and this thing's got. The less I know, when the cops bang on the door, he pulls out all these guns and starts blowing the hell out of things. And when the cops started, oh my God, things just got worse. And now he's threatening to kill us. So who's this? Am I talking to Ed now, or which of you am I talking to? I'm talking to Steve. Okay, Steve. Well, as I say, believe me, the party's nearly over. And we don't want to escalate things, but you're not leaving us any option. We can't stay here all night, you know. Yeah, I know that.
There was one piece of intelligence from the motel manager that stayed with McNeely throughout the negotiations.
He described them as 2 young fellows who arrived in the Porsche, and they went to the room and hadn't really been seen. There was no information of people coming back and forth or anything of that nature at all.
Body on the floor doesn't want to do it. Steve, why don't we go with the 2 of you then? If the 2 of you come out, you'll see there's absolutely no problems. We can get this resolved, and then your 2 friends will recognize that we're here to do a professional job, and it'll all be over and done with and resolved. There'll be no problems whatsoever, Steve.
They were then suggesting that there was 4 of them, that 2 of them wanted to surrender, but they were afraid that they were going to be shot in the back if they tried to leave. That seemed a little preposterous, to be honest with you. Within the command post, we're thinking of this and we're going, this just does not make sense. There was no action in the background. You know, the only time that I was speaking with them, I could hear no one else. There was nothing. There was no arguing. There was no fighting. Probably after a couple of hours, you know, the dialogue really changed where they were joking back and forth.
So just like hang tough, I guess have a coffee, relax. We're not going to be doing anything. I mean, everything's calm right now. It's nice, so we'll keep it that way. And we're going to talk to, and hopefully we're going to get the hell out of here.
Another incident, they turned around and said, please tell the hotel manager I'm sorry.
This was a lot of back and forth negotiation.
Oh, huge. Yeah, it just went on and on. And, you know, what you have to remember here is these young fellows were, trust me, even at that stage, they were still in crisis. But at the same time, I knew we really had to tell them that, look, enough is enough.
I don't know if you caught my last thing here, but my brother has threatened to kill me if I walk out the door. I want to walk out. So does Ed, but I don't want a bullet in my back. Well, as I say, we appreciate that, Steve, but I suppose you've all got yourselves in that position one way or the other. Can I speak to John again? Okay, Barney, this is Ed. I'm coming out now. Okay, Ed, so that makes 2 of you. What about the other fellas in there, okay? You'll see there's nobody else in here.
I was standing on Lakeshore, keeping a close eye on the rear of the motel and the rooftop. As soon as the inspector on scene told me to get in the car and go in and arrest one of the fellas, then I knew it was over.
Okay, you can walk out very, very slowly, but pay attention to what the technical officers are saying, okay? Bring the radio, set the radio down and come out with your hands on top of your head, okay?
After 8 long hours of gunfire and intense negotiations, 2 suspects finally emerged from room 18 of the Rainbow Motel.
Should I come out while he's there? Yes, Ed.
I'm just wondering who's in the room. Have I seen them in the motel strip before from walking the beat?
I remember watching them come out of the room thinking, these guys look like ordinary guys. They're just a couple of kids.
Constable Jack West was one of the arresting officers.
He looked like a student out of high school, neatly dressed. When I saw Katz and his appearance, it didn't really surprise me. You know, what's a criminal look like? I mean, I was surprised in his appearance, but not surprised that he was capable of doing something like this. It just seemed like it was another day in his life. Now he was caught, he was being charged. He seemed satisfied with that and just sat there quietly. I did a quick search, put him in the police car, transported him to the police division, and then placed him in an interview room. I had found a ring with 2 keys, and I showed Katz this. I said, "What is this?" And he replied, "Keys to a stolen car." And I said, "Where's the car?" He said, "In British Columbia."
Back at the motel, investigators began surveying the damage left behind by Michael Katz and Austin Peer.
Our ATF had fired 39 canisters of tear gas into the room. So it was a lot of gas in there, so it took a while for that to clear.
Hard on the ice and on the back of the throat, actually.
The room itself was a total mess. They had the furniture, the mattresses piled up against the windows to help keep out the tear gas and help to absorb that. But the place was wrecked. There was a hole in the floor where they dug through and gone down. So they were sheltered from the bullets going in, and also the tear gas was not so effective as it should have been. There were guns all over the floor.
Any serial number on it, or? Yeah.
There was long guns, handguns, shotguns, all different kinds of guns.
One up?
One up the spout. That's a 9mm Luger. This says a Browning 9mm, high power.
And a box, about the size of a normal size fishing tackle box, full of bullets. So they had a lot of ammunition. I think it was about 480 total rounds that were fired.
That's a lot of bullets.
Yes, an extreme amount. And it also means a lot of reloading, because you only get a clip with, 8 or 10 bullets in it. So that's a lot of reloading or switching guns.
What did you learn about Katz and Peer? Who were these guys?
Well, there were basically a couple of petty criminals. They were minor criminals. They didn't have long records. I don't think there was anything startling on there that would think, oh, they're the guys that did this. There's nothing to show that they would do what they did. Pierre had done time but was out, but Katz was serving time and had escaped. So they were doing minor sentences. They weren't, in for a long time, but they were minor criminals.
Tony Ward returned to the station to interview the shooters, both in their early 20s.
We went and saw Michael Katz first, and we spoke to him for quite a while. About an hour, he was quite forthcoming in what they'd been up to. And we went in and saw the other fellow, Austin Peer, and he wanted to talk to his lawyer, so we were only in there a few minutes.
Detective Ward charged the men with the attempted murder of Earl Skipon, Kathy Geach, Mike Ervick, and Peter Phoenix. That would keep them in custody while the team continued to investigate.
When I was going through their personal belongings, I found a receipt for a gun site. I also found, I think it was a ferry ticket from the BC to go over to Nanaimo, and a couple other things that had information about that area on them.
Around the same time, Jack West discovered that only one of Katz's keys was for a stolen car.
Upon further investigation, it showed that the second key would unlock the lock on a motel room door in Nanaimo, BC.
What's more, they traced serial numbers from the seized guns in CPIC, a police database which tracks stolen property.
They were obviously stolen from somewhere. We had a few incidences in the province where people had put a chain on their bars on a gun shop and pulled the window out and then gone in and stolen guns. So I was thinking maybe it was one of those incidences.
No one expected they'd get a hit from clear across the country.
Some of the guns had been identified as proceeds of a robbery and murder in Nanaimo, BC. So contact was made to the RCMP in Nanaimo, and then they contacted me pretty soon afterwards. And what I found from them was that a gun shop had been robbed, and the two owners, a man and woman, a husband and wife, had been basically executed.
The Lankinows had been in business quite a long time and were very respectable people. They were, I would say, in the mid-60s. They were business partners as well as husband and wife, and they had children. They were well known to a lot of the police officers because many police officers are avid firearms enthusiasts. So I knew them to see them and from being in shooting sports supply in the past.
Constable Gary Rogers was on call with the Royal Canadian Mounted Police Serious Crime Unit one Sunday morning in January of 1991.
The phone rang and the officer who was on the other end said, "I think we've got something really serious here."
They received a call at 9:45 Sunday morning from a passerby who looked in the window of this store and saw two bodies.
Some person had dropped over to shooting sports supply because they wanted to see if they were open on a Sunday because they were interested in buying an AR-15 rifle. He came over and it was locked up, but he looked in the window and then he looked down, he saw the Lankinows' bodies on the floor, and he knew them. And he thought at first it was dummies on the floor, just for some sort of a prank or some sort of a ward off a break-in. And then he looked and he says, "Those are real, that's Erica and burnt." What I could see is through the glass and the protection safety bars on the windows was the outline of two people laying on the floor, and I could see blood around their heads. It was obvious that the two victims were dead. There was no point in even trying to check for pulse or life signs. Or that it was clear.
Rogers had investigated murders in Nanaimo before, but nothing like this.
Most of the murder cases that you get involved with when you're in a homicide squad are smoking guns, they're not whodunits. This one was clearly a whodunit and a whydunit.
They quickly identified a possible motive.
A number of firearms had been stolen. That was obvious right off the bat. We estimated that there may be 20-some firearms had been stolen during this, an uncounted amount of ammunition. The bodies were in a prone position. In other words, they were lying face down on the floor with their hands beside them, laid straight out. So that isn't a position that somebody voluntarily goes into. So we could sense right away that this was a case that there was a held up, that they were ordered to lay face down on the floor, and there was no fight, no resistance, no defensive marks on them. They were both shot through the back of the head and were instantly killed.
Are there any leads, any clues?
Not at this time. I don't want to comment on anything in that regard.
No suspects?
Not at this point.
With the help of a forensic pathologist, investigators determined there were two gunmen.
We knew from the angles from sort of up and down and also from side to side where the positions of the killers were in. And we could develop a picture quite quickly that this had to be two separate people that pulled the triggers, and that one was right-handed and another was left-handed. Every informant handler went out to their people to try to get a handle from what's going on in the underground. Nothing. Nobody had a clue what was going on. Even within the bikers, we had an appointment going there, and the message we got back right away from the Hells Angels was that we've had nothing to do with this.
For days, the team analyzed the crime scene, searching for clues. They looked at business records, a firearms log, and handwritten receipt books.
All the firearms that are in that gun store are required by law to be registered on a firearms ledger. So what we had to do was to go through the entire scene of over 500 firearms that were in there and go by process of elimination which ones couldn't be accounted for. And clearly on we could see that there was a pattern, that the rifles that were missing were not hunting or even sportsman rifles. They were assault weapons.
A former RCMP officer who worked part-time at the gun shop recalled a recent exchange between the Lankanaws and two young men who had come to put down a deposit on a laser sight.
He says, by the way, they were supposed to come back here on either the Friday night or the Saturday night, right at closing time, and they had asked that if you're closed up already, would you still let us through so we can complete the sale of this laser point?
It was a lead, but for nearly a week, it led nowhere.
We didn't have a clue who was behind it. No theories, nothing.
Across the country in Toronto, as the tear gas and gun smoke settles at the Rainbow Motel,
Chinese AK-47.
the seized weapons tell Detective Tony War that his shooters were in Nanaimo exactly 1 week before.
We were able to get the serial numbers from them, which we then checked against our secret computer, which led us to the Nanaimo incident and showed they were stolen from there. Obviously, we wanted to know where they got all these guns, so they were obviously stolen from somewhere, but I didn't know there'd be a double murder connected to it as well.
We got a report that there was a massive shootout at the Rainbow Motel in Toronto and that they'd arrested two suspects in possession of the stolen firearms from the Lankanaw murders. And the response was, who are these guys? Where'd they come from? Why did they do this? What's going on? And just piece by piece, the puzzle pieces showed up, and we eventually put a picture together. And then bit by bit, we were filled in on the big picture of what happened. And it's quite a story.
Welcome back. As though an epic gun battle with police and a double homicide weren't enough, investigators discover a rash of other crimes committed by the gunmen. Here now is Karen Lieberman with the conclusion of the Rainbow Motel Shootout.
Once police identified that some of the guns used in the Toronto shootout had been stolen from the store in Nanaimo, they needed proof that Katz and Peer were the ones who'd killed the shop owners. Some of the first pieces of evidence included the ferry ticket and laser sight receipt found by Tony War.
It put them at the scene. Circumstantially, they were murdered at noon on one day, but they weren't found until the afternoon of the following day, so they'd been there for 24 hours. So we knew the dates. So when I saw the date on the receipt, it put them there before the murders. That was a good piece of evidence, along with obviously being in possession of all the stolen property.
Including the weapons used to kill the Lankanaws.
They still had the murder weapons in their possession in that motel room. The 9mm pistol and the .357 revolver were ballistically linked back to the bullets that went through the Lankanaws' heads. That was a complete 100% forensic fact.
Just having the guns didn't necessarily make them the killers. Another forensic fact did.
We were able to determine that the person with the semi-automatic, with the 9mm, was right-handed, and the person with the .357 was left-handed. And eventually, when Michael Katz and Austin Peer were arrested, we were able to prove which one was right-handed and which one was left-handed. The officers in Toronto that had arrested them said they watched when they signed their booking in sheet. They also went to interview them and told them that they had to read them their rights and they had to get them to sign their rights. Then when we brought them back to Nanaimo, we did the same thing over again. If memory serves me right, Michael Katz was right-handed and Austin Peer was left-handed. Michael Katz would have stood to Erica's side and shot her twice with the 9mm, and Peer would have stood to Burns' left and shot him with the .357. It was just pure badness. I can't find any other motive for this than just pure badness. They met as co-inmates at Headingley Prison in Manitoba. I think they were in remand for some sort of petty crime, and it might have even been robbery. When they got out, they went on a crime spree across Canada. They were both charged with 2 counts of first-degree murder. They were both charged with the first-degree murders of Burnt and first-degree murders of Erica, even though it was obviously one shot the other, but there and then together is how the wording of the charge goes.
In meeting with the Crown Attorney, we also decided that we charged them with attempted murder of the 5 ETF officers that were first on the scene as well. So we ended up charging them with 9 attempt murders and related offenses. We laid all those charges against them here in Toronto, and eventually they were transferred out to BC to face the charges out there.
The trial ran in the old Nanaimo courthouse for 5 weeks. They ran 77 witnesses, and there was over 200 pieces of exhibits.
According to evidence presented at court, the crime spree actually started in Toronto on Christmas Day 1990. Katz and Pierre robbed a gun shop in the northeast part of the city. 2 days later, the Porsche was reported stolen, and a day after that, 4 banks were robbed. According to receipts found during the investigation, the Porsche passed through Banff National Park on December 31st. On January 2nd, the pair checked into the Royal Plaza Hotel in Victoria, BC. The next day, they steal a Mercury Topaz. The keys for both the car and hotel are the ones Katz had on him when they were arrested. On January 5th, they take the ferry to Nanaimo and visit Shooting Sports Supply, dropping a deposit on the electronic laser site. 4 days later, they rob another bank in Surrey. On January 12th, they return to Shooting Sports Supply, murder the Lankanaws, and steal dozens of guns. The next day, they check out of the Royal Plaza in Victoria, swap out the Topaz for the Porsche, which they'd parked, and head eastbound back to Toronto. January 19th at 1 a.m., they checked into the Rainbow Motel. Just 6 hours later, Ervik and Phoenix spotted the Porsche, and minutes later, the first shots were fired.
The jury was out for 6 hours in deliberations, which for a 5-week trial, that's really short. I don't think it mattered to the jurors which one pulled which trigger. There and then together. Planned, premeditated, cold-blooded killings, and they convicted them.
After they were convicted of the 2 murders, they were sentenced to life for 25 years.
The judge said to them, to the effect that I'm sentencing both of you to life imprisonment with no chance of parole for 25 years, by which is mandated by law. But if I had my way, I would have both of you taken out into the courtyard and hung by your necks until you're dead. Pretty powerful.
Equally powerful, the memories carried for decades by the officers at the Rainbow Motel Shootout.
The smell of the gun smoke stayed with me for months. And every time I hear a loud noise now, it still startles me. The noise of all the gunfire between the 2 buildings was just loud and frightening.
The first thought that went through my mind was that they were going to shoot my legs and I couldn't run anymore.
There was no time to really think other than you hope that you're staying alive.
Any officer out there on the street, if he's not wearing his bulletproof vest as of Saturday, he should have it on today.
Try and assess the situation that you're going into as best you can, and before you go out in the street, put on the vest. And wear both panels. Don't just put one in. Wear them both.
There was a hesitancy by some officers to wear their police vests at the time. Well, this is a very good example why you should wear your police vest. We always listen to incidents of shootings in the States, still do, but it didn't happen so often in Canada. Well, this can happen in Canada, so we have to be prepared and we have to wear our vests, and it helps you increase the odds of you going home at night.
After the shootout, Kathy Geach returned to the front lines in Toronto without Skip-On.
He recovered, and he did not go back out on the road. He even suggested to me, don't go back out on the road. It's too dangerous. I said, I can't do that. I just love helping people too much. They put him in the crime analyst unit, and he worked there until he retired. Unfortunately, he passed away 6 years after the shooting from a massive heart attack. And I was his honor guard at his funeral. It's the least I could have done after what he did for me.
In October 2016, Michael Katz was granted full parole with conditions, including no alcohol and being forbidden from going to Nanaimo, BC. In March 2022, those particular conditions were removed, though others remain. While eligible for parole, Austin Pierre is still in prison. In August 2021, he waived his right to a hearing, indicating he was not interested in release. Officer Earl Skip-On survived the shooting thanks in large part to the bulletproof vest he wore. At the time, vests were not mandatory. Today, police departments set their own body armor policies. I'm Anthony Robart. Thank you for joining us tonight on Crime Beat.
Want more episodes of Crime Beat? Listen to the Crime Beat podcast now for free on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you find your favorite podcast. And for past episodes of Crime Beat, go to the Global TV app, visit globaltv.com, or check out our Crime Beat YouTube page.